Making Reading Click, Integrating Dual Coding AI in the Orton-Gillingham Approach. I'm Kyle Brown, the Educational Technology Director at Trident Academy, one of the founding members of ALDS, the Association of LD Schools. Three important trends are changing the field of specialized reading instruction. These changes help teachers use proven methods that better support students with dyslexia and other reading challenges. These trends are the embrace of the science of reading, the growth of multisensory approaches towards literacy, and the use of AI technology to help bring differentiation and individualization to language instruction. The first trend is the growing embrace of the science of reading. Bringing together research from psychology, neuroscience, and cognitive linguistics, SOR explains how people learn to read. Fundamentally, reading and writing are not innate human skills. While spoken language is indeed an innate human instinct, part of our evolutionary biology, writing and reading are learned social behaviors, and indeed skills that have only relatively recently become part of our human toolkit. Humans need clear, step-by-step teaching in phonological awareness, fluency, vocabulary, phonics, comprehension to master these skills. We see schools now moving away from older methods and choosing more rigorously tested scientific approaches. The second trend is the growing scientific support for multisensory instruction, such as the Orton-Gillingham or OG approach. Research shows that using multiple senses, sight, sound, movement, and touch, helps students retain reading skills more effectively. When a student sees a letter, hears its sound, and writes it in sand simultaneously, their brain forms stronger connections. The third trend is the new, unprecedented capabilities brought about by advances in generative artificial intelligence. AI has the potential to help us develop highly customized, adaptive learning environments that can accurately identify a student's reading deficiencies and almost instantly modify practice exercises or readings. A teacher's ability to provide individualized instruction can be enhanced by using generative AI tools to create custom decodable texts, targeted practicing materials, and instant feedback truly tailored to the specific needs of every single student. This technology promises to improve the effectiveness and efficiency of established programs, making the demanding requirements of SOR and OG more accessible and scalable. Now let's examine dual coding theory, which focuses on leveraging two cognitive systems for a unified goal: improved memory and comprehension. Dual coding, for our purposes here, will mostly be talking about using tools such as graphic novel-like material and infographic summaries to connect decoding with deep-level understanding. Sometimes teaching students with dyslexia and related learning differences can be a bit segmented. The OG method is very effective at building phonemic awareness and matching sounds to letters through touch, movement, and hearing, but the visual component typically covers only letter recognition. The bigger idea of concept imagery, or picturing whole stories and their deeper meaning, is usually addressed in a different setting. General classrooms, I feel, that follow the Orton-Gillingham approach can benefit from also using a dual-coded teaching model. Teachers can support students with dyslexia by using their strong visual skills with carefully tuned infographics and graphic-style stories. Tools such as Google's Gemini and Notebook LM enable teachers to quickly create personalized, decodable study guides and graphic novel-like material for specific lessons. This also helps address the challenge of finding reading material that's appropriate for older students who still struggle with decoding, but may balk against reading material at their current ability level. Dual coding theory posits two distinct but connected systems in the human mind: the verbal system, processing language-based items in the left hemisphere, and the nonverbal system, processing spatial, visual, and sensory information in the right. The verbal system handles words, phrases, and other language information, including letter sounds, meanings, and order. The imagery system processes spatial, visual, and nonverbal information such as mental pictures, sounds, feelings, and spatial arrangements. This system gives another way to make sense of information and helps us create and use mental images of the world around us and of our inner thoughts. Using visual stories and similar resources helps students learn more deeply, remember better, and understand more, especially for students with different learning needs, because it connects the two hemispheres of the brain when learning. When discussing how concepts enter the brain, dual coding theory uses the terms logogens, verbal units, and imagens, nonverbal or visual units. To clarify the terminology, the internal representations of language are logogens. Words, syllables, phonemes are all types of logogens. The left hemisphere of the brain is where they are mostly processed. The neural networks that process logogens are often disrupted in dyslexic students. Imagens are the internal representations of spatial arrangements, sensory perceptions, and mental images. The visual cortex and the right hemisphere are where they are mostly processed. Importantly, this system remains robust in many dyslexic students. A core tenet of dual coding theory is that learning is significantly more robust and effective when instruction or materials are designed to engage both of these systems simultaneously. This simultaneous activation is what Alan Pivio, the developer of the dual coding theory, termed the additive effect, or the dual coding advantage. When learners receive the same information through both verbal and visual channels, for instance, hearing a definition while seeing a corresponding image, they create two separate cognitive traces for that information. These dual traces make the memory more stable and significantly increase the probability of successful recall and comprehension. If the verbal memory of the word is inaccessible, the learner can still retrieve the information via the visual memory of the image. This redundancy in memory storage is the mechanism underlying the additive effect, leading to superior learning outcomes compared to the instruction that only utilizes one system. And if one path is inaccessible, the other provides a kind of semantic backdoor. We need to stop here and make a clear distinction between true dual coding and the three cueing system, meaning, structure, visual, or MSV. And the three coding approach, where students are shown a picture and told, look at the picture, what word makes sense? Is it a pony? Is it a horse? It bypasses the decoding practice necessary for true understanding. It teaches students to infer words from pictures or context rather than sounding them out for comprehension. In contrast, a dual coding OG combo approach would reinforce decoding skills and aids comprehension by instructing students to first sound it out. Now look at the images to make sure you understand the story, passage, or sentence. It aims to help with total comprehension, not individual word recognition. Now let's get back to it. For an educator utilizing a multisensory, structured, and sequential approach such as OG, understanding this dual mental architecture is not merely academic. It's a key to unlocking the potential of students with language-based learning differences. Effective instruction, particularly within the OG framework, deliberately activates both the verbal and nonverbal channels simultaneously. When a student sees the letter A, a visual imagery input, says the sound ah, a verbal auditory input, and then traces the letter in sand, a kinesthetic input, they're creating multiple interconnected memory traces. This cross-referencing between the verbal and imagery systems, this referential connection, enhances understanding and retention. It bypasses the primary weakness in phonological processing that often contributes to these learning challenges. By providing multiple entry points for learning, dual coding increases the likelihood that information will be successfully encoded and retrieved, working similar neural pathways as utilized by the OG approach. This team-up can be highly effective in practice. To use a concrete example, a dual coding theory explains that viewing the word volcano, engaging the verbal system, while simultaneously seeing a diagram of an eruption, engaging the visual system, creates a powerful, redundant, and amplified memory trace. If a student later struggles to decode the word volcano or recall its definition, a vivid visual image of the explosive cone and flowing lava provides that semantic backdoor, triggering the associated verbal information and its meaning, thereby helping with successful retrieval and comprehension. Here, two types of imagery are distinguished: symbol imagery and concept imagery. With symbol imagery, a person harnesses the ability to visualize the letters in a word, such as visualizing the letters C, A, and T in your mind's eye when you spell cat. This is critical to learning spelling. Concept imagery is the ability to visualize the meaning of the text, imagining the cat chasing a mouse or napping in a sunbeam. This is the focus of integrating dual coding theory through graphic novels. Many students can decode, meaning they have symbol imagery, but cannot comprehend, meaning they lack concept imagery. Dual-coded materials bridge this specific gap. The important takeaway from dual coding is that these two systems are independent, but do talk to each other. When you encode information in both systems, say the word tree plus show a picture of a tree, you create a double backup in memory. This double redundancy makes recall much easier. If the word path fails, which often occurs with dyslexia, the visual path serves as a retrieval route. It is also important to note that dual coding theory differs from the learning styles myth. The notion that, for example, a student that's a visual learner should only receive visual instruction, that's been well refuted. Research shows that teaching a preferred style doesn't really help. Dual coding theory, on the other hand, recommends hitting the information from multiple angles for everyone. All students benefit when both the word and the picture systems are activated simultaneously. In a remedial setting, it's not about matching a style. It's about making the visual and linguistic parts of the brain connect more strongly. Dyslexia, as we know, is a neurobiological condition characterized by difficulties with accurate and/or fluent word recognition and by poor encoding and decoding abilities. These difficulties typically result from a deficit in the phonological component of language. Brain imaging studies show that the specific reading areas of the left hemisphere, networks crucial for rapid analysis of word sounds and the automatic recognition of printed words, exhibit underactivity or atypical activation in individuals with dyslexia. While the left brain networks responsible for verbal processing and word analysis may be less efficient or sluggish, the visual and spatial networks housed primarily in the right hemisphere are typically intact, often demonstrating remarkable development and high functionality. This differential activation pattern suggests a cognitive style that favors visual-spatial reasoning. Dual coding theory provides a powerful instructional framework then for leveraging these right brain strengths. Remember that dual coding posits that cognition involves two distinct yet interconnected mental representational systems: a verbal system that processes language, both written and spoken, and a nonverbal system that processes imagery and spatial information. When instructional techniques such as the multisensory structured approach of Orton-Gillingham are deliberately dual-coded, they engage both systems simultaneously. For a dyslexic learner, this means that the robust visual and spatial areas of the right brain are explicitly brought into the learning process. These stronger nonverbal networks act to scaffold the weaker verbal and phonological areas. For instance, associating a sound, phoneme, with its letter, grapheme, and a specific memorable action, color, or shape creates a dual-coded representation that is more resistant to forgetting and easier to retrieve. This approach transforms a traditionally left-brain dominant task into one that leverages the dyslexic learner's dual-hemisphere cognitive profile to enhance memory consolidation, retrieval, and overall learning effectiveness. So, for phonological processing issues, for example, pairing sounds with memorable images provides a visual trigger for recall. For rapid naming skills, using consistent visual structures like an infographic can provide spatial cues that make it easier to retrieve verbal information faster. And for those with working memory logjams, graphic panels like those in graphic novels reduce cognitive load by keeping context and connection on the page and not tying up the limited supply of memory. Many struggling readers eventually become good at decoding words through intensive OG work. But while they can read words perfectly, sometimes they don't understand what they read. Nancy Bell of Lindamood Bell fame realized through the dual coding lens that this problem stemmed from a lack of concept imagery. That is, the ability to form a full mental picture or movie from spoken or written words was underdeveloped. For these students, the word system processes the little parts, the sounds, but the picture system fails to build the whole image. Without that internal picture, the text can feel abstract and disconnected. But with the judicial use of graphic novels in the OG-centric curriculum, it can serve as an external blueprint for this internal process. By placing images alongside the text, the material models how to visualize, helping students eventually learn to form those mental images on their own. This leads us to expanding the multisensory definition, recognizing the value of the graphic novel style within the Orton-Gillingham ecosystem. Please understand that the term graphic novel is used here as a term because it's well understood from popular culture, but it doesn't mean that the material presented in this fashion is always in a novel format. decodable readers, scientific concept explanations, mathematical reasoning. All of this information can be imparted using a graphic format. Sequential art, graphic or visual narrative, comics, even the French term bande dessinée can be used if one likes. But here, we will stick to the graphic novel moniker. Traditionally, the application of the visual component in the multisensory VAKT, visual, auditory, kinesthetic, tactile, instructional model, has been relatively narrow. Its scope has largely been centered on the orthographic level, encompassing the concrete observation of letter cards, the direct reading of word lists, or the visual cue of a teacher's mouth forming sounds. While this level of visual input is undeniably essential for establishing and reinforcing the crucial understanding that written symbols correspond to spoken sounds, it does not fully leverage the cognitive benefits described by modern dual coding theory. Dual coding theory proposes that cognition involves two distinct interconnected mental systems, remember, the verbal system that processes language and the nonverbal system that handles imagery and spatial information, right? The logogens and the infogens. When instruction is confined primarily to the orthographic, it engages the verbal linguistic system, but underutilizes the potential of the nonverbal imaginal system. Integrating dual coding theory into multisensory instruction does not require abandoning foundational work on symbol imagery, such as associating a letter with its sound. Instead, it mandates a strategic expansion that builds off of this symbol imagery foundation. To fully harness dual coding, the visual component must be broadened to incorporate a rich, concrete, and varied range of nonverbal imagery. This could involve using pictorial representations, conceptual diagrams, mental models, and concrete visual aids that illustrate the meaning, structure, or relationship of the language concept being taught. This expansion ensures that both the verbal and orthographic systems, and the nonverbal and imaginal systems, are activated simultaneously, creating two distinct, robust, and retrievable mental codes for the same information. This dual coding leads to deeper comprehension, improved memory retrieval, and a more robust grasp of linguistic concepts, moving instruction beyond mere decoding practice to encompassing meaningful linguistic and conceptual understanding. It is worth repeating here that dual coding differs from the widely discredited 3-cueing method. Dual coding reinforces decoding and aids comprehension, whereas 3-cueing bypasses decoding and encourages guessing. Stop guessing. Learn to decode instead, with images as an aid, not as a replacement. Integrating graphic novels and infographics into a school with an OG approach requires a focused, explicit pedagogical standard, particularly regarding the relationship between visual elements and decoding. The fundamental rule that must be deeply and repeatedly reinforced is that students must not use the accompanying images as a primary means of guessing the written words. Reading comes first. The images, whether the sequential panels of a graphic novel or the summarized charts and diagrams of an infographic, serve a distinct and crucial function. They are a tool for comprehension monitoring and contextual reinforcement. It helps students build a mental model, visualize the concept, and confirm that the word they decoded makes semantic sense within the narrative or informational context. This distinction is vital because the core of the OG approach is multisensory, systematic instruction in phonics and morphology that builds automaticity in decoding. That core must remain rock solid. Just allowing students to rely on pictures to skip decoding undermines systematic instruction and reinforces the harmful habit of guessing, a common characteristic of struggling readers. Furthermore, when selecting these visual materials, educators should recognize that not all graphic elements are equal. In some modern or stylized graphic novels, for example, the visuals may be far more abstract, symbolic, or multi-layered than the simple, direct sample images often used in early reading materials. These more complex visual metaphors or artistic interpretations require higher-level inferential skills and may not offer a straightforward one-to-one correspondence with the text. Therefore, teachers must also explicitly instruct students to read visual information, interpreting composition, color, facial expressions, and panel sequencing as a separate yet complementary skill to decoding text. This ensures that the rich contextual cues offered by dual coding are leveraged correctly without allowing the visuals to bypass the essential systematic work of decoding. Teachers should adhere to a text-first rule, with students focusing on the letters before moving to the images. When used correctly, the image becomes a type of visual reward for successfully decoding the words and a helpful hook to help them retain the meaning. They decode the hard stuff, and then they get the satisfaction of really understanding the story through both direct language and mental imagery. With dyslexia frequently have ADHD or executive function deficits too. An OG-style multisensory approach is inherently structured to support these learners, but text-heavy materials can still overwhelm working memory. Infographics and graphic novels serve as external memory devices. In a dense paragraph, a student must remember the subject of the first sentence while decoding the fifth sentence. In a graphic novel format, the subject remains visible in the panel. This visual permanence reduces executive load, allowing the student to allocate more cognitive resources to decoding and applying phonics rules. This aligns with findings that visual storytelling improves comprehension by reducing cognitive load, enabling students to focus on meaning rather than the mechanics. A common misconception is that graphic novels do the work for the reader. In reality, they demand high-level inferential thinking. This occurs primarily in the gutter, that is, the white space between the panels. If panel A shows a character raising a hammer, and panel B shows a broken vase, the reader must infer the action, the hammer strike, that occurred in the gutter. This process, known as closure, requires the reader to be an active participant in constructing the narrative. OG instruction places a heavy emphasis on sequencing, the beginning, the middle, and end. Graphic novels make this sequence spatial. Students can physically see the arc of the story across the page, aiding those who struggle to organize narrative events linearly in their minds. Research indicates that graphic novels often contain a higher density of rare words, those Tier 2 and Tier 3 vocab words, than typical children's chapter books. Authors of graphic novels feel emboldened to use complex vocabulary because the image provides the necessary context for the definition. A panel might feature the text, "He looked despondent," and the accompanying image shows the character with slumped shoulders and a downturned mouth. The student reading this decodes the word and immediately receives a visual definition. This simultaneous presentation creates a robust semantic map for the new vocabulary word, adding a visual retrieval mechanism to help augment the linguistic one. The ultimate application of this format in an OG-style approach is the decodable graphic novel. Traditional graphic novels may have unregulated text that's too difficult for a remedial student, but a decodable graphic novel restricts the text to specific phonics patterns the student has learned, such as closed syllables and short vowels, while using sophisticated art to tell a mature story. These texts allow a 12-year-old student, for example, to read a story about space exploration or mystery, using only the phonics tools they possess, with the art as a support structure. This builds both fluency and confidence, without the frustration of encountering undecodable words. And with the advent of generative AI, teachers can create these graphic decodables on any subject, with any nuance, for any reading level, customizable to the needs and interests of each student. Infographics can be an exceptionally effective medium for translating the complex, often abstract concepts of an OG-style curriculum into tangible, memorable visuals. Unlike traditional graphic novels, which primarily support narrative, infographics are perfectly suited to illuminate the expository and structural components of language. In an educational setting, they function as the essential visual user interface for understanding the English language's intricate system. Think of a phonemically organized sound wall that you might find in a classroom. A well-designed sound wall is itself a large-scale interactive infographic. These visuals leverage the principles of dual coding theory by presenting information both verbally, right, the letter, the grapheme, and non-verbally, right, that visual, or if you're using to trace a kinesthetic trigger. Let's consider a couple more examples. One commonly used is a vowel valley infographic, which arranges vowels in a characteristic U shape. Right? This arrangement is not arbitrary. It maps the kinesthetic movement of the jaw from the high closed position, like the E sound, down to the low open position, as in the ah sound, and back up, also noting the rounding or unrounding of the lips. This creates a powerful kinesthetic visual map. When a student struggles to recall the sound of O, using the infographic, the open mouth diagram, and the symbol's position can help trigger the corresponding motor memory. In another example, a consonant chart infographic organizes consonants not by the alphabet, but by the two primary linguistic features: the manner of articulation, that is, how the air is stopped or released, like stops, fricatives, nasals, and the place of articulation, right? Where in the mouth the sound is actually made. Is it the lips, the teeth, the throat? This organizational schema is vital because it explains linguistic relationships. For instance, it immediately clarifies why a P and a B are a paired set, right? They share the same place and manner of articulation, differing only in whether the voice box is engaged, right? That is voiced, or not, unvoiced. One of the big difficulties in English spelling stems from its morphophonemic nature. It's just a big word that means we get our pieces from all over the place. Our orthography is not a simple one-to-one match of letter to sound, right? It's not a simple phonological connection. It also encodes meaning through its morphological components, its prefixes, its suffixes, its roots. To achieve true reading and writing proficiency, especially given the multitude of exceptions and quirks in English, students must grasp this underlying structure, the hidden layers of meaning, history, and word construction that govern modern spelling. This is where the power of infographics is really and fully realized. Using the dual coding system, infographics can illustrate complex linguistic relationships, showing how a word's root, affixes, meaning, and sound interconnect. These visual diagrams transform what students often see as a chaotic, unpredictable mess of letters into a logical, coherent system. This shift moves spelling from tedious, rote memorization to an engaging exploration of etymology and word construction. Practical infographic applications include word matrices, which place a core root, example struct, at the center, with visible categorized array of prefixes, con, de, in, on one side, and suffixes, yon, your, s, on the other. This visual schema empowers students to rapidly generate dozens of morphologically related words from a single root, reinforcing the math and systematic nature of language construction. Another application is etymological timelines or maps. These visuals can map the history of English from its Anglo-Saxon roots to the influence of Norman French and the infusion of Latin and Greek during the Renaissance and beyond. This approach provides a logical context for seemingly arbitrary spelling. For example, a timeline can illustrate why the word night retains a silent K, as it comes from the Anglo-Saxon knicket. In contrast, a word like chronicle uses the CH to represent the K sound due to its later arrival from the Greek word chronos. Until recently, the primary barrier to using graphic novels and custom infographics in the classroom was production. Teachers are not generally professional illustrators, and purchasing specialized decodable graphic novels, when you can even find them to match your curriculum, is expensive and limited in its variety. The educational technology landscape of 2026, however, has shattered this barrier, spearheaded by tools such as Google's Gemini and Notebook LM. AI can now serve as an on-demand illustrator and researcher, enabling educators to generate professional-grade, strictly controlled, decodable material in minutes. It is of absolute importance, though, to acknowledge that AI-generated artistic work cannot replicate the creative depth achieved by skilled human authors and illustrators. The highest quality graphic novels and infographics will continue to be produced by dedicated professionals whose contributions should be recognized and supported. But nevertheless, the advent of new AI tools provides educators and students with accessible means to create basic graphic novels and infographics to enhance instruction and engagement across subjects. I feel that this use of AI tools is justified when human-created resources are unavailable or impractical. Providing for the students' needs should remain the primary consideration. An upgrade driving this revolution is the Gemini 3 Pro image model, known as Nano Banana, released in late 2025. This model addressed the two fatal flaws in previous AI image generators that made them unsuitable for educational decoding purposes. Previous models struggled to render text within images, producing gibberish. Nano Banana Pro can accurately render specific text on signs, labels, or speech bubbles within the image, which is crucial for instructional material. In a graphic novel, the protagonist must look the same in panel 1 as in panel 6. Nano Banana Pro allows for character locking, or seed consistency, ensuring narrative continuity. This ability will inevitably become standard on future generative AI models. Notebook LM has evolved from a research assistant into a full-fledged learning studio. It operates slightly differently on what's called a RAG, or Retrieval Augmented Generation framework, meaning that it generates content solely from the user-uploaded sources. This is critical for OG schools. A teacher can upload the specific OG manual and phonics scope and sequence to ensure that AI does not introduce phonics patterns that have not yet been taught. The newly introduced Deep Research feature gives the notebook the ability to autonomously browse the web for supplementary context. Right? For example, find historical details about the California Gold Rush for a 5th grade story, while keeping the reading level controlled. A suite of tools is also available that quickly converts uploaded documents into other formats, such as audio overviews, video overviews, infographics, data tables, slide decks, and the list keeps growing. As schools move forward with integrating powerful generative AI tools, establishing robust ethical and data privacy guardrails is not just advisable, it is paramount. A significant and often overlooked risk lies in using consumer-grade AI platforms, such as the widely available free versions of ChatGPT. These tools often operate under the terms of service that may reserve the right to use submitted data to train their public models, creating a substantial and unacceptable privacy risk for student data. For this reason, schools must use only enterprise or education editions of these platforms, such as the tools in the Google Workspace for Education. A critical feature of the education edition of platforms like Gemini and Notebook LM is the contractual commitment that user data, specifically student input, is not used to train the publicly available model. Google, for instance, contractually guarantees that student data remains within the school's secure domain, ensuring compliance with federal mandates such as the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act and the Children's Online Privacy Protection Act. However, even within this walled garden environment, vigilance is required. Teachers must be thoroughly trained in best practices for maintaining student anonymity. This involves a consistent policy to use pseudonyms or generic descriptive prompts when generating intervention or instructional materials. For example, a teacher should use a phrase such as, "Generate a reading comprehension passage for a 5th grade student who struggles with decoding," rather than a specific name such as, "Generate a reading comprehension passage for Donna Hayward." Beyond privacy, another key ethical issue is the risk that AI models could perpetuate and amplify societal stereotypes. When teachers use AI to generate creative content, such as personalized graphic novels or short stories for literacy intervention, they must actively prompt the AI for diversity. This intentional input is necessary to ensure that the generated materials feature a wide array of characters, cultures, and backgrounds, guaranteeing that all students see themselves reflected and represented positively within the learning material. Students who identify more with the material on a personal level tend to learn it better. Institutional policy governing the use of AI in the classroom must clearly delineate its role. It should explicitly state that AI-generated visual material and other outputs are intended to support the core academic text, serving as powerful scaffolds, and are not replacements for the text itself or the deep cognitive work of decoding and comprehension. The foundational principle for all AI integration must be augmentation, not automation. AI's purpose is to elevate the learning experience, offering personalized support and rich contextual examples. However, under no circumstances must it be used to bypass the necessary, effortful learning process, nor should it ever be permitted to complete academic work entirely on the student's behalf. Human effort and intellectual engagement are and will always be primary drivers of growth. Looking ahead to 2027 and beyond, the convergence of structured multisensory principles, like we see in the Orton-Gillingham approach, with advanced AI technologies, signals a future of real-time adaptation and hyper-personalization. Advanced reading and learning applications may soon enable instruction to shift dynamically in response to a student's immediate challenges. For example, if a student hesitates or misreads a particular word, AI could instantly generate and display a micropanel visual mnemonic, an immediately relevant image or graphic, adjacent to the text. This visual support would provide personalized multisensory reinforcement and could be gradually withdrawn as the student demonstrates mastery and automaticity. In this envisioned future, the traditional static decodable book may evolve into a dynamic decodable experience, continuously calibrated to each student's evolving needs and ensuring individualized, responsive instruction. While some educators understandably resist adding more screens to reading interventions, especially in multisensory, hands-on approaches like Orton-Gillingham, there is a compelling case for the strategic integration of digital tools. Emerging pedagogical research and data support the use of AI-generated visuals as a powerful form of print referencing. This approach uses technology not as a distraction, but as a tool to anchor and reinforce the text's abstract concepts. Furthermore, a low-tech reading option can always be maintained by printing the visual material. Combining AI-enhanced multimodal instruction that aligns with the linguistic rigor of an approach like OG with the cognitive theory of dual coding requires a comprehensive strategic approach to achieve meaningful, lasting, school-wide integration. It is fundamentally insufficient to provide teachers with new technological tools alone. Training is essential for educators to effectively and efficiently integrate the complex interplay of AI literacy and structured literacy in their teaching practices. This systemic implementation necessitates a cultural shift, moving from a technology as an add-on mindset to one that views AI as an integrated research and classroom assistant for differentiated, multisensory instruction. To institutionalize this expertise, schools could establish a professional development track, culminating in something like a specialized AIOG or similar type certification. This ensures that teachers have both foundational pedagogical knowledge and the required technical skills to leverage AI responsibly and effectively. Let's take a look at Phase 1, Structured Literacy Training. The cornerstone of this training remains a foundational certification in the basics of the Orton-Gillingham or similar style approach. This phase is non-negotiable. Teachers must master the core tenets of phonology, morphology, syntax, and semantics. A teacher, for instance, cannot effectively prompt an AI to create a CVC text with all short A sounds or a multisyllabic word list featuring the schwa sound if they do not possess a deep understanding of what a CVC word is, the precise linguistic constraints of a short A phoneme, or the rules governing syllable division. This foundational knowledge provides the essential vocabulary and intellectual framework necessary to guide and audit the AI's output. Phase 2 is prompt engineering and constraint-based literacy design, where we move beyond basic AI usage and focus on advanced prompt engineering for literacy. Teachers at this phase learn to treat the large language model AIs not as an equal creative partner, but as a junior copywriter or a highly capable yet overly ambitious new instructional assistant that requires strict, detailed, and pedagogically sound boundaries to operate. Training at this point would include how to specify word structure, right? For example, like only closed syllables or no final E's. Context specifics, right? Like historical fiction, written at a third grade reading level. And dual coding requirements. For example, generate a flow chart illustrating the water cycle with text labels limited to single-syllable words. In this phase, teachers would learn to generate effective visual aids, practicing with how to prompt an AI to create cognitively efficient graphics. The focus is on simplifying concepts to reduce extraneous cognitive load for students with learning differences and aligning text labels closely with visual elements to help maximize the contiguity principle of multimedia learning. Broadly, people learn more effectively when corresponding words and visuals are presented together rather than separately in time or space. Learning to analyze AI output for linguistic errors, structural inconsistencies, and misalignment with OG or other multisensory principles, and then providing corrective, targeted feedback to the AI, right, called refining the prompt, would all be part of this phase. We also need to be aware of ethical and bias in our prompt writing, right? Understanding at this point how AI might inadvertently perpetuate biases in language complexity or representation, and learning to employ prompts to mitigate these risks. Phase 3 is the multimodal literacy training. This final phase bridges OG's linguistic focus with the cognitive principles of dual coding. Teachers are trained not only to use visuals, but also to teach students how to decode multimodal information, that is, pictures with images, right? Graphic novels and infographics. This includes training on how to teach students to read graphic novels to understand panel sequencing and narrative closure, right? That is the gutter between the panels, and interpreting complex infographics, right? Understanding data visualization conventions. As far as the prompt engineering part of this equation goes, I've created some professional development resources to specifically help my school, Trident Academy, although with some easy altering, it can be tailored to any school. The QR code you see will take you to a site where I've outlined a set of procedures for creating graphic novels and infographics that align to our school's OG approach to teaching and learning. Using a specialized Gemini Gem and Google's Notebook LM, these guides can help you generate material for any grade level, reading level, subject, and personalized interests, all based on our school's scope and sequence. We don't have time to go into the details here, but please do check it out, and I welcome any feedback on the material, and I would also love to see anything cool you all create with it. The fusion of dual coding theory with the foundational principles of multisensory approaches such as Orton-Gillingham, and the incorporation of visual narrative tools such as graphic novels and infographics can truly deepen educational practices without diminishing academic standards when approached with knowledge, judgment, and planning. This integration is a logical evolution of a core multisensory principle. By systematically and consciously engaging the student's nonverbal, visuospatial cognitive system, educators construct a vital and accessible cognitive scaffold. This support is particularly crucial for students whose primary linguistic or verbal systems are demonstrably affected by conditions such as dyslexia, providing an alternative, robust pathway to literacy. This theoretical advancement has transitioned from an aspirational ideal to a tangible reality driven by the maturation of generative AI tools. This introduction of platforms like Gemini and Notebook LM has revolutionized the creation of instructional materials. The limitations of prepackaged, generic content no longer constrain educators. They now possess the power to generate an on-demand supply of instructional materials that are hyper-personalized to individual students' needs, culturally relevant to diverse populations, and most critically, dual-coded in a manner that adheres rigorously to established tenets of the science of reading and multisensory approaches like OG. But as a wise man once said, with great power comes great responsibility. Only by deliberately and thoughtfully using AI tools, always guided by clear educational goals and strict ethical and professional training, can educators benefit from them, and always with the goal of helping students across the reading spectrum in ways that help them learn the best. This deliberate integration helps ensure that the option of a visual narrative, utilizing the inherent human capacity to process and derive meaning from images, is not a luxury, but a guaranteed resource available to every student. This shift holds the promise of transforming the traditionally frustrating struggle to decode text into a genuine, joyful, and successful process of reading and comprehension for those with learning differences. Thanks for watching, and if you have any questions or comments, please contact me, Kyle Brown, at Trident Academy. My email address here is at the bottom, kbrown@tridentacademy.com. Thanks again. This bibliography lists the main sources I read in preparing this presentation, adding to my own personal observations, experiences, and educational background. I encourage you all to do some more reading and research on this topic if this presentation motivates you.